Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep, really deep into Athenian democracy.
Athenian democracy, fascinating.
We're pulling some excerpts from Democracy in Ancient Greece, the Origins, Thinkers, and Philosophies Behind the World's First Democracy. Quite a title.
It is quite a mouthful, yeah.
But, what we really want to get out of this, I think, is understanding where this system, this radical system of government, where it came from, right?
Yeah.
What were its institutions? Who were the major players? And what was the lasting impact on political thought, even today?
Well, I think to really understand Athenian democracy and why it was so groundbreaking, we have to go back.
Okay.
Back to the time before democracy.
Okay, take us back.
So before all this radical Athenian democracy,
Yeah.
Athens was ruled by aristocratic family.
Right, the elites.
Exactly. And this concentration of power in the hands of a few, it led to a lot of tension.
Of course. Yeah.
Social tension, unrest, and much of it was due to economic disparity.
Right. The have and have-nots. Classic story.
Classic story, exactly. And this really created a pressing need for change.
Yeah.
It really paved the way for these political reforms that ultimately gave rise to democracy. It wasn't just, poof, there's democracy.
It's so interesting how, this is something we see time and time in throughout history, right?
Right.
The Athenian democracy wasn't just sort of this spontaneous invention, but it emerged as a response, a direct response to these pre-existing social and economic challenges.
Absolutely.
So who are the key players? Who drove these reforms?
Well, two figures really stand out, Solon and Cleisthenes.
Okay, Solon and Cleisthenes.
Solon he was a statesman and lawmaker in the 6th century BCE.
Okay.
And he introduced some reforms that really started to shift power away from the aristocracy.
Interesting.
Yeah, one of the most impactful was this cancellation of debts.
Wow.
And the outlawing of debt slavery.
Bold move.
It was a bold move, and this measure really relieved a lot of Athenians from economic hardship.
Yeah.
And it prevented the aristocracy from kind of further exploiting the poor. Imagine how revolutionary that was. That was at the time.
Yeah.
A deliberate act to restructure society.
It's incredible, really. It wasn't just about, like you said, putting a Band-Aid on the problem. This was a fundamental shift, right?
Yeah.
In the power dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of Athenian society.
Yeah.
And it shows, to me, a recognition that economic inequality can really undermine social stability.
Absolutely.
And that addressing this inequality is crucial for establishing a just and a functional political system. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
What other reforms did Solon implement?
So Solon also reorganized Athenian social structure. He moved away from the system based just on birth.
Like who your daddy was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So he moved away from that, and he introduced this system based on wealth.
Ah, interesting.
So he created these 4 classes, the Pentecosia Medimnoi.
The Pentecosia Medimnoi.
The wealthiest, who produce 500 measures of grain or oil. Then there were the hippies or knights, who could produce 300 measures.
Okay.
Then the Zeugatai, who could produce 150 measures. And lastly, the Thetes, who produced, less than 150.
Right. So it was still, it sounds like it was still favoring the wealthy to a certain degree.
Of course, it wasn't a perfect system.
Right.
It still favored the wealthy. But what it did was it granted political rights.
Okay.
Based on this new class structure.
I see.
So even the poorest citizens, even the Thetes, could participate in the assembly. They could serve on juries. And they could have, a voice in political decisions.
So Solon's reforms, it's so interesting how while they weren't fully egalitarian, they introduced this concept of political participation. Based on a much broader measure of social standing.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just about aristocratic lineage.
Exactly, yeah.
Which really laid the groundwork for further democratic reform.
It did.
So how did Cleisthenes build upon this foundation?
Well, Cleisthenes, who's often hailed as the father of Athenian democracy.
Father of Athenian democracy.
He really implemented some reforms in the late 6th century BCE that really kind of established the framework for democratic governance.
I see.
So he introduced this concept of isonomia.
Isonomia.
Isonomia, which means equality before the law.
Okay.
And this principle ensured that all citizens, regardless of their wealth or their social status, were subject to the same laws and had equal access to the justice system.
So isonomia is, I mean, it really represents a radical departure from those systems where you have, the privileged few who are just above the law.
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And that principle of legal equality, I mean, that remains a cornerstone of modern democracies today.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how did Cleisthenes ensure that this concept of equality was actually reflected in the structure, the nuts and bolts of Athenian governance?
Okay, so Cleisthenes, what he did was he completely restructured Athenian society.
Wow.
And he organized citizens into demes.
Demes,
Which were basically local neighborhoods.
Okay.
Or villages.
Got it.
And then these demes then, they formed the basis for these larger groupings called tribes. Tribes, but these tribes weren't based on geographic proximity or traditional family ties as they were before.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so each tribe was actually composed of demes from different regions.
Oh, okay.
Of Attica, the territory of Athens.
Clever.
Yeah, and this was a really ingenious system because it broke down the traditional power structures that were associated with family and geography.
Yeah.
It prevented any one region or clan from dominating Athenian politics.
It's almost like he was deliberately trying to shake things up, right? To dismantle the old systems of power and create a more level playing field.
Exactly. Right.
For political participation. I mean, it's really a testament to his understanding that true democracy requires not just legal equality, but also these structural mechanisms to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of just a select few.
It really is, yeah.
So how did this new social structure translate into the actual institutions of Athenian democracy?
Okay, so Cleisthenes, what he did was he established the Boule.
The Boule.
The Boule. This was a council of 500 citizens, and they were responsible for the day-to-day administration of the city. So each of the 10 tribes, they selected 50 members by lot to serve on the Boule. And this ensured, representation from all parts of Attica.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about the Boule is that the presidency actually rotated among the tribes.
Oh, wow.
So with each group of 50 serving as the executive committee, known as the Prytany, for 1/10 of the year.
So this rotating presidency is another example, right, of how Athenian democracy was really designed to prevent this concentration of power in the hands of a single individual or a group. And it also suggests that they really believed in a diversity of perspectives,
right,
being essential for effective governance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just remarkable how much thought went into structuring these institutions to ensure broad participation and also to guard against tyranny. So what was the role of the assembly or the Ekklesia?
Right. The Ekklesia, the assembly, was really the heart of Athenian democracy.
Okay.
It was open to all male citizens over the age of 18. And they met regularly, about 40 times a year, on this hill called the Phoenix.
The Phoenix.
The Phoenix, yeah. Which was big enough to accommodate up to 6,000 citizens. I mean, can you imagine? It's difficult for us to really fully grasp what that must have been like.
Yeah, it's such a stark contrast, right, to modern democracies where we elect representatives to make decisions on our behalf.
Right.
And the Athenian system, it really truly empowered the citizens to directly shape the course of their city.
It did, yeah.
So what specific powers did the assembly hold?
So the assembly, they debated and voted on laws, decrees, and policies.
Okay, so big stuff.
Yeah, big stuff.
Yeah.
They decided matters of war and peace. They elected certain officials and even conducted ostracisms.
Right, which we'll get to. We'll get to later.
Yeah.
So the assembly was the sovereign body of Athenian democracy. It really embodied this concept of direct rule by the people. So the assemblies, I mean, it's wide-ranging powers really highlight the Athenian commitment to this direct democracy.
Absolutely.
But how did they ensure that the legal system, the actual legal system, also reflected this democratic spirit?
Well, that's a great question. So the Athenian legal system, much like their political system, relied heavily on citizen participation.
Okay.
And this was most evident in the Dikasteria, which were the popular courts.
Popular courts, okay.
So these courts, they weren't presided over by professional judges.
Mm.
Instead, you had large juries, and they were composed of ordinary citizens.
Wow.
Yeah, and these juries could range in size
Okay.
from 200 to over 1,500 citizens.
That's huge.
Huge, yeah, and all chosen by lot,
Wow.
from volunteers over 30 years old.
So you have these massive juries.
Yeah.
Made up of everyday citizens.
Right.
Must have been, I mean, I imagine that presented some unique opportunities, but also some real challenges.
Yeah.
How did these juries actually function?
So the Dikasteria, they handled a wide variety of cases, both public and private.
Okay.
And there weren't any professional judges or lawyers to kind of guide the proceedings.
Wow.
So instead, what happened was the two parties involved, they just presented their cases directly.
Really?
Yeah, to the jury. They relied on their own persuasive skills.
So it was a battle of rhetoric.
Basically, yeah. And whatever evidence they could muster.
Wow.
And the jurors then voted by majority rule
Okay.
to determine the outcome of the case.
I see.
But what's remarkable is that these decisions were made without deliberation.
No deliberation.
Among the jurors, no.
So they just heard the arguments
Right.
and they voted. That's fascinating. I mean, that really raises questions about, how deeply they were able to understand complex legal matters.
Yeah.
And the potential for biases or emotional appeals, swaying your judgments. How did the Athenian system deal with those concerns?
Well, the Athenian system relied on this principle of collective wisdom.
Okay.
The belief was that the large size of the juries
Okay.
and the random selection of jurors would kind of mitigate the impact of individual biases.
So it's like a wisdom of the crowds kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But the lack of deliberation certainly left room for manipulation.
Of course, yeah.
By, skilled orators
Mhm.
who could appeal to the emotions of the jury
Yeah.
rather than the facts.
Right. So this reliance on citizen participation in the legal system.
Yeah.
While it really embodies, the democratic ideals.
Yeah.
It also reveals some of the inherent tensions, right? And potential vulnerabilities within Athenian democracy.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's move on to another institution
Okay.
that was designed to kind of safeguard the system.
Right.
Ostracism.
Yeah.
Can you explain how this practice actually worked?
Yeah.
And what was its purpose?
So ostracism, this was a unique feature of Athenian democracy.
Yeah.
It allowed citizens to exile a person
Okay.
for 10 years
For 10 years. Wow.
if they deemed that person a threat
To the state.
to the state.
So once a year,
Right.
the assembly would hold this special vote
Right.
where citizens could write the name of the person they wanted to ostracize
Right.
on these pottery shards.
Yeah, called ostraca.
Ostraca. Okay.
And if a certain threshold of votes was reached,
Okay.
typically it was around 6,000.
6,000. Wow.
Then the individual with the most votes would be exiled.
So this system of ostracism, I mean, it sounds radical,
It was.
but it highlights, how concerned the Athenians were
Yeah.
with preventing tyranny
Yeah.
or any individual accumulating too much power.
Right.
But of course it raises concerns about potential abuse.
Right.
How do they ensure that ostracism wasn't just used to eliminate political rivals
Right.
or people who held unpopular opinions?
Well, that was the problem, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So the process of ostracism, while it was based on this popular vote,
Yeah.
it didn't have any formal procedures for presenting evidence
Yeah.
or defending yourself
Against accusations.
against accusations.
So you could just be ostracized based on suspicion.
Basically, yeah. I mean, the decision rested solely on the perception
Wow.
of that person's threat
Okay.
to the state.
Interesting.
So that made it vulnerable, obviously, to manipulation
Yeah.
and personal vendettas.
Of course.
And there is evidence
Okay.
to suggest that ostracism was often used as a political tool to sideline rivals,
Right.
or those who simply disagreed
Wow.
with the prevailing views of the assembly.
So ostracism, while it was meant to be a safeguard, right, against tyranny, it could itself become a tool of oppression.
Yeah,
It's a really delicate balance, isn't it?
it is.
Between protecting democracy
Yeah,
and ensuring individual rights.
absolutely.
So let's shift our focus now to a period that's often considered the pinnacle of Athenian democracy, the Golden Age.
Right.
under the leadership of Pericles.
Right.
What were the defining features of this era, and how did Pericles shape the course of Athenian democracy?
So Pericles, he was a prominent statesman.
Okay.
And a general rose to prominence in the mid 5th century BCE.
Okay.
And he really ushered in what's often referred to as the golden age of Athens.
Okay.
This was a period marked by political, economic, and cultural flourishing.
Right.
He was a skilled orator.
Okay.
And a shrewd political strategist.
Right.
Who really championed democratic ideals and expanded the rights of Athenian citizens.
So Pericles' reputation as this champion of democracy, it really rests on specific reforms and policies that he implemented.
Yeah.
What were some of his most significant contributions?
No, Pericles, he introduced a system of payments for jury duty.
Oh, interesting.
And public service.
Okay.
And this allowed citizens from all economic background to participate in government.
Okay.
Without facing financial hardship.
Right, because before that, it was really only the wealthy.
Exactly, yeah.
Who could afford to take time away from their work.
Right.
To serve on juries.
Exactly.
Or hold public office.
Right.
So Pericles' reform, it really made Athenian democracy more inclusive.
Yeah.
And accessible.
It did, yeah.
To ordinary citizens.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this introduction of payments for public service, I mean, it was a huge step towards a more equitable and representative democracy.
Absolutely.
It addressed the economic barriers that often prevent the poor from engaging in the political process, which is something we still struggle with today.
Yeah.
What other measures did Pericles take to strengthen Athenian democracy?
Well, he reduced the power of the Areopagus Council.
The Areopagus Council.
Yeah, so this was a traditional body composed of former archons, the highest elected officials in Athens. And this council, historically, it was dominated by the aristocracy.
Okay.
And they had held considerable influence over legal and political matters.
Right.
So Pericles' move, it further curtailed the power of the elite.
Okay.
And strengthened the authority of the assembly and the popular courts.
So Pericles' reforms were really aimed at creating this more balanced and inclusive system of governance.
Right.
Really shifting power away from the traditional elites and empowering ordinary citizens.
Exactly.
But he's also known, right, for his role in Athenian military expansion.
Yeah.
And the rise of the Athenian Empire.
Right.
How did these imperial ambitions impact the very democracy that he was championing?
Well, Pericles, he recognized the strategic importance of naval power.
Okay.
So he strengthened the Athenian navy, transformed it into a formidable force.
Wow.
Yeah. And this allowed Athens to establish the Delian League.
The Delian League.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was a maritime alliance.
Okay.
Initially formed to protect Greek city-states from Persian aggression.
Right, right.
But over time, the Delian League, it kind of transformed.
It became more than just an alliance.
Yeah, it became an Athenian empire.
Right.
With Athens exerting dominance over its allies and demanding tribute.
So this shift from a defensive alliance to an empire, I mean, that marks a real turning point.
It does.
In Athenian history. And it raises questions about the compatibility of imperial ambitions with democratic ideals.
Absolutely.
How did Athenian democracy respond to the challenges of empire?
Well, the growth of the Athenian empire brought immense wealth and power to Athens.
Okay.
But it also created tensions and resentment among its allies, who chafed under Athenian dominance.
Right.
And this resentment eventually led to, the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War.
The Peloponnesian War.
In 431 BCE.
Yeah.
And this was a devastating conflict with Sparta and its allies.
Right.
And it would last for 27 years.
So the Peloponnesian War, which is, often viewed as this clash of ideologies between Athenian democracy and Spartan oligarchy.
Right.
It really tested the resilience of Athenian democracy.
It did, yeah.
And it exposed some of its inherent limitations.
It did.
How did this war impact Athenian society?
Okay.
And its system of governance?
So the the war placed immense strain
Okay.
on Athenian resources,
All
and,
right.
and it led to social and political upheaval.
Wow.
Yeah, Pericles himself, he died from the plague
Oh, wow.
early in the war,
Okay.
which left, a leadership void
Yeah.
at a really critical time. And the war's prolonged nature and the constant threat of Spartan invasion,
Okay.
it eroded public trust
Right.
and led to internal divisions. There were even attempts to overthrow
Wow.
the democratic system.
Really?
Yeah.
During the war?
Yeah, with oligarchic factions seizing power briefly during the war's later stages.
So the Peloponnesian War, while it ultimately ended in Athenian defeat,
Yeah.
it revealed this fragility of democracy in the face of external threats
Yeah.
and internal strife.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even Pericles, with all of his efforts to strengthen democratic institutions,
Yeah.
he couldn't fully shield Athens from the destabilizing forces unleashed by imperial overreach.
No.
But despite its flaws,
Right.
and its ultimate demise,
Right.
Athenian democracy had a profound impact
It did.
on Western political thought.
Absolutely.
So let's delve now into the ideas of some of the great Athenian thinkers
Yeah.
who grappled with the strengths and weaknesses
Right.
of their democracy,
Right.
and whose insights really continue to shape our understanding of governance today.
Well, Athenian democracy, while revolutionary for its time,
Yeah.
it was far from a perfect system, and its limitations and its contradictions.
Right.
They sparked all this intense debate
Okay.
amongst philosophers and political thinkers
Okay.
who were trying to understand its essence,
Yeah.
its potential, and its pitfalls.
So let's start with Socrates,
Okay.
a figure who really embodies both the spirit of Athenian intellectual inquiry, but also the tensions inherent in challenging the status quo.
Absolutely.
So what were his views on Athenian democracy?
So Socrates, unlike many of his contemporaries, he didn't leave behind any written works.
Really?
So his ideas and his teachings are primarily known through the writings of his students,
Okay.
most notably Plato.
Plato, right.
But from these accounts, we can kind of piece together this picture of Socrates as this critical observer of Athenian democracy. And he questioned whether ordinary citizens, even with the right to participate in government, whether they really possessed the wisdom and the knowledge necessary to make sound political decisions.
So it sounds like Socrates was skeptical of the very foundation of Athenian democracy.
Yeah.
The belief in the collective wisdom of the people.
Yeah. Right.
What was the basis for his skepticism?
Well, Socrates employed this method of questioning,
Okay.
now known as the Socratic method,
Right.
to expose the inconsistencies
Okay.
in people's beliefs and to challenge conventional wisdom.
So he was a bit of a rabble rouser.
He was definitely a provocateur.
Yeah.
And through this relentless questioning,
Okay.
he aimed to guide people
Okay.
to a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them.
I see.
So he believed that true knowledge, it stemmed from self-reflection and critical examination, and not from blind adherence to popular opinion.
So Socrates' emphasis on self-reflection
Yeah.
and critical thinking
Yeah.
suggests this distrust of the emotional appeals
Yeah.
and rhetoric that often dominated
Right.
the Athenian assembly.
Yeah.
He seems to have really valued reason and wisdom over sort of the fleeting passions of the crowd.
Absolutely.
Did Socrates offer, any alternative system of government or propose any specific reforms to address what he saw as the flaws in Athenian democracy?
Well, Socrates' primary concern, it wasn't to prescribe a particular form of government.
Yeah.
It was more to encourage individuals to cultivate virtue
Okay.
and pursue knowledge. He believed that a just and well-governed society, it required not just laws and institutions, but citizens.
Okay.
Citizens who were informed,
Okay.
rational, and committed to the common good.
So Socrates' focus on individual virtue and the pursuit of knowledge
Yeah.
as essential elements of a just society. I mean, it really transcends
Who does?
the specifics of any one political system.
Yeah.
It's a timeless reminder that the quality of governance really depends on the character and wisdom of its citizens.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how did Socrates' most famous student, Plato, build upon his mentor's ideas
Right.
and develop his own critique of Athenian democracy?
Well, Plato, deeply influenced by Socrates' teachings and really profoundly affected by his mentor's unjust execution at the hands of the Athenian democracy.
Right.
He harbored this deep skepticism towards this form of government, and in his really seminal work, The Republic.
The Republic.
Yeah.
He presents this scathing critique
Okay.
of Athenian democracy,
Yeah.
arguing that it's inherently flawed
Okay.
and ultimately leads to tyranny.
So what were the specific flaws
No.
that Plato identified in Athenian democracy? So Plato, like Socrates,
Okay.
he believed that most people lacked the knowledge, the wisdom, and the capacity for rational judgment that was necessary for effective governance.
Okay.
And he argued that democracy, by granting equal political rights to all citizens, regardless of their abilities or qualifications,
Right.
that it pandered to the desires of the masses rather than promoting reason and virtue.
Yeah.
And he used this allegory of the ship
Okay.
to illustrate his point.
The allegory of the ship.
The allegory of the ship, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so imagine a ship at sea and the crew
Okay.
representing the citizens in a democracy.
Okay.
They're all allowed to take turns steering the ship, even though most of them have no knowledge of navigation or seamanship.
Right.
They're easily swayed by those who can, make the most persuasive arguments.
Right.
Or appeal to their desires.
Okay.
Even if those arguments, lead the ship off course.
Right. So it's headed for the rocks.
Exactly. And in Plato's view, Athenian democracy resembled this chaotic ship, vulnerable to the whims of the crowd and the manipulations of skilled orators.
So this allegory really powerfully captures
It does.
Plato's concern about the potential for demagoguery
Right.
in a democratic system. He seems to be suggesting that allowing everyone
Yeah.
an equal say in government without regard for their knowledge or competence
Right.
leads to poor decision making.
Yeah.
And ultimately jeopardizes the well-being of the state.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So did Plato offer an alternative to this system that he deems so inherently flawed?
He did. So in the Republic, he outlines his vision for an ideal state
Okay.
ruled by philosopher kings.
Philosopher kings.
And these philosopher kings would be carefully selected and rigorously trained from a young age, and they would possess the knowledge, the wisdom, and the virtue
Okay.
necessary to govern justly and wisely.
So this concept of philosopher kings, I mean, it's a radical departure
It is, yeah.
from Athenian democracy.
It is.
Suggests a deep distrust of the capacity of ordinary citizens to govern themselves.
Right.
And a belief that a select few endowed with superior intellect and moral character
Yeah.
are better suited to this task.
Right.
Did Plato's views on governance evolve at all over time? Did he ever reconsider this seemingly elitist position?
He did. So in his later work, The Laws, he offers this more nuanced and pragmatic approach
Okay.
to governance.
That's tricky.
So while he still expresses these reservations about the potential for mob rule
Right.
and the tyranny of the majority, he recognizes the need for a more balanced system that incorporates elements of democracy, but also provides these checks and balances to prevent any one group
Okay.
from gaining too much power.
So this shift in Plato's thinking seems to suggest a recognition
It does.
that his earlier utopian vision of philosopher kings might not be attainable
Right.
or even desirable in the real world.
Right.
What specific elements did he propose in the laws
Okay.
to create this more balanced and stable system of government?
So in the laws, he advocates for this mixed constitution
Okay.
that combines elements of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy.
So he's taking bits and pieces.
Yeah, he's trying to find find this balance.
Okay.
Right. He recognizes that each of these systems, when taken to extremes,
Okay.
can become corrupted.
All right.
Monarchy can degenerate into tyranny,
Okay.
aristocracy into oligarchy,
Right.
and democracy into mob rule. So Plato believed that by blending these elements and establishing mechanisms to check and balance each other,
Okay.
a more stable and just society could be achieved.
So Plato's later work reveals a more mature
It does.
and nuanced
Yeah.
understanding of the complexities
Yeah.
of governance. It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds
Right.
can evolve in their thinking
Yeah.
as they grapple with these practical challenges
Right.
of creating a just and functional society.
Right.
So how did Aristotle, Plato's student and another towering figure really in Western philosophy,
Right.
how did he approach this question of Athenian democracy and its place within this broader theory of government?
Well, Aristotle, he was known for his empirical approach to knowledge.
Yeah.
He took this more measured, more analytical view of democracy than his teacher Plato.
Okay.
So while he recognized the potential pitfalls of unchecked majority rule, he didn't dismiss democracy outright.
Okay.
Instead, he really sought to understand its strengths and weaknesses
Okay.
by studying various forms of government
Got it.
and analyzing their underlying principles.
So this empirical approach, right?
Yeah.
Based on observation and analysis.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of abstract theorizing.
Right.
I mean, it really reflects Aristotle's his broader philosophical approach.
It does, yeah.
So how did he actually classify different forms of government, and where did Athenian democracy fit within his schema?
So Aristotle, he identified these three basic forms of government: rule by one,
Okay.
rule by the few,
Okay.
and rule by the many.
Okay. So he's breaking it down.
He's breaking it down, yeah.
Got it.
And then he distinguished between good and bad versions of each form.
Okay. So there's good rule by one and bad rule by one.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So rule by one, when exercised for the common good,
Yeah,
that's monarchy.
Okay.
But when it's corrupted,
Okay.
it becomes tyranny.
Right.
And then rule by the few,
Okay.
when based on merit and virtue, that's aristocracy.
Right.
But when corrupted, it becomes oligarchy.
Right.
And then lastly, rule by the many,
Okay.
when exercised responsibly,
Okay.
with a focus on the common good. This is what Aristotle termed polity.
Polity. Okay.
But when corrupted,
Okay.
it becomes democracy in its negative sense.
Right.
Characterized by mob rule and the pursuit of individual interests at the expense of the common good.
So Aristotle's classification system, it really provides this framework, right?
Yeah.
For understanding the various ways in which societies can organize themselves
It does, yeah.
politically.
Yeah.
And it also highlights this potential for any system of government, regardless of its structure,
Yeah.
to be corrupted
Right.
when power is abused or exercised without regard for the common good.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
which form of government did Aristotle consider most ideal?
Well, Aristotle, unlike Plato, didn't believe in a single ideal form of government
Right.
that could be applied universally. He recognized that the best form of government for a particular society would depend on a variety of factors, including its size,
Okay.
its social structure,
Yeah.
and the character of its citizens. But he generally favored a mixed constitution,
Okay.
combining elements of democracy,
Okay.
aristocracy, and monarchy.
So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, because he believed that such a system, by balancing the interests of different groups and providing these checks against the concentration of power, would be the most stable and just.
So Aristotle's emphasis on this mixed constitution, incorporating elements from various forms of government, it reflects a really pragmatic approach, right?
Yeah.
It recognizes the complexities of governance and the need for adaptability.
Yeah.
It's a perspective that resonates with modern democratic systems.
That does.
You know, which often incorporate these checks and balances
Yeah.
and strive to represent the interests of diverse groups within society.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how did Aristotle view the role of citizens? in a well-governed society.
Well, he believed that that active citizen participation was essential for cultivating virtue and promoting the common good. He saw political involvement not as a burden, but as a privilege.
Wow.
And a responsibility. And he also stressed the importance of education in preparing citizens for their role in government. So education, according to Aristotle, it should cultivate not only knowledge and skills, but also moral character. And a sense of civic duty.
So Aristotle's emphasis on active citizenship and the importance of education, I mean, it really foreshadows some of the core principles of modern democratic thought. It's a reminder that democracy thrives when citizens are informed, engaged, and committed to the well-being of their community. So in addition to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, there was another group of thinkers who influenced Athenian political thought.
The Sophists.
Yeah, the Sophists.
How did their ideas differ from those of the philosophers that we've discussed so far? And what impact did they have on Athenian society?
So the Sophists, these were itinerant teachers who traveled throughout Greece, offering this instruction in rhetoric, logic, and other subjects. And they emerged as this prominent intellectual force in 5th century BCE Athens.
Got it.
But unlike Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, who sought to uncover these universal truths and establish these objective standards of morality, the Sophists emphasized the relative nature of truth and the power of persuasion. They believed that there were no absolute moral principles, and that what was considered right or wrong, it really varied depending on the circumstances and the prevailing social norms.
So this relativistic approach to truth and morality must have been quite controversial, right?
It was, yeah.
In a society that was grappling with these fundamental questions about justice and virtue and the best form of government.
Absolutely, yeah. So how did the Sophists' ideas actually influence Athenian political life?
Well, the Sophists, through their teachings on rhetoric and argumentation, they really equipped Athenian citizens with the skills necessary to participate effectively in the assembly and the courts. They emphasized the importance of being able to articulate one's views persuasively, regardless of the underlying truth or validity of those views. They saw success in the democratic system as really dependent on this ability to win arguments and sway public opinion.
So the Sophists' focus on rhetoric and persuasive techniques really highlights this potential for manipulation and deception within a democratic system, where decisions are often made based on the most compelling arguments, not necessarily the most truthful or just.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how did other thinkers, particularly Socrates and Plato, respond to the Sophists' relativistic approach and their emphasis on persuasion over truth?
Well, Socrates and Plato, they were deeply critical of the Sophists. They accused them of undermining traditional morality and prioritizing rhetorical skill over the pursuit of genuine knowledge and understanding. They worried that the Sophists' relativistic approach it would lead to this society where truth became irrelevant. And power would reside solely in the hands of those who could most effectively manipulate language and emotions.
So this debate, between the Sophists and philosophers like Socrates and Plato, it really highlights this enduring tension within democratic societies, the balance between freedom of speech and the responsibility to use that freedom ethically. And in the pursuit of truth, it raises questions about the role of education in fostering critical thinking skills and the ability to discern between genuine argumentation and manipulative rhetoric. So as we conclude our exploration of Athenian democracy,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways that we can glean from this ancient experiment in self-governance,
Okay.
and how can those takeaways actually inform our understanding of democracy in the modern world?
Well, Athenian democracy, despite its limitations
Right.
and its ultimate demise,
Yeah.
it remains a source of inspiration
Oh,
and a cautionary tale
okay.
for modern democracies.
Yeah.
It demonstrates the power of citizen participation,
Right.
the importance of legal equality,
Yeah.
and the need for institutions that prevent the concentration of power. But it also highlights, the vulnerabilities of democratic systems to demagoguery, to manipulation, and the potential for the tyranny of the majority.
It's a delicate balance.
It is, yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the Athenian experience really underscores the importance of informed and engaged citizenship,
Yeah.
a rule of law,
Absolutely.
and this constant vigilance that's required to safeguard democratic principles.
Right.
It reminds us that democracy is not this static system.
No,
It's an ongoing process
it is, yeah.
that requires constant adaptation,
Right.
reflection,
Yeah.
and a willingness to learn from both the successes and the failures of the past,
Absolutely.
and the insights of Athenian thinkers.
Yeah.
From Socrates' emphasis on self-reflection and the pursuit of knowledge to Aristotle's belief in the importance of a mixed constitution,
Right.
and active citizenship. I mean, they continue to resonate
They do.
in contemporary debates
Absolutely. Yeah.
about the best way to govern ourselves and create a just and equitable society. The Athenian legacy, both in its triumphs and its shortcomings, really offers valuable lessons for anyone seeking to understand the complexities and the possibilities of democratic governance. Sort of fascinating journey through Athenian democracy, exploring its origins, its institutions, key figures, and its enduring legacy on political thought, from the reforms of Solon and Cleisthenes to the heights of the golden age under Pericles and the thought-provoking critiques of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We've seen how this ancient system, while imperfect, laid the groundwork for many of the democratic ideals that we value today. As we move forward in our own democratic societies, it's essential to remember the lessons of Athens, both its successes and its failures, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, to participate actively in our political processes, and to strive for a just and equitable society. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.